Welcome to our evening about CRP points, Certificate of Religious Practice. I'm here with Dan Bacall, Director of External Affairs, the Office of the Chief Rabbi, also joined by David Collins, Chief Program Officer of the US. Rabbi Kobi Abramov will also be joining us soon, the Tribe Programming Rabbi, and Sun Ayman also is here with us, the Chair of the Yavneh College Academy Trust. We're also going to be hearing from the Chief Rabbi soon. I remember a couple of years back, my soon-to-be teenage son came home from school and he said, "Daddy, my friends have this new kind of, games console or controller, something like that. I want it, I need it, it's very important, you've got to buy it for me." And like many other parents, I was faced with probably what is the classic parenting dilemma, which is when your kid wants something, but you don't necessarily think it's good for them. And broadly speaking, there are two modes you can go into. Mode number one is control. Control means basically overriding the situation, not changing what your child wants to do, but basically override. You can't do it. You're not allowed. Perhaps there'll be consequences. I'm not letting you. Sometimes even elements of reward are forms of control. But the other way of doing it is something called chinuch. Chinuch means education. Chinuch means not just controlling, not bribing, not demanding consequences or punishments, not saying this is the way and I'm dictating, but chinuch means allowing them to decide, giving them maturity to own the situation and really changing them as a person by putting them within the right frame of mind and correct situation. And therefore, I'm proud to say what we did in that situation, and you can't always do it, was the following. We said, no problem. But instead of buying the games console, at least borrow it from a friend for a day, and let's see how it goes. Of course, my son borrowed the games console. We hardly saw him that day. Literally, he came in from school. He went on it straight away. Supper time, we hardly saw him. Yeah, you're talking about 5 minutes gobbling down supper, coming back to his games console, etc. And I remember it was about 8:30 in the evening. And he turned around to me with these groggy eyes, as only sometimes teenagers can. And he says, "Daddy, I think you were right. I think maybe this isn't the best thing for me. It's going to make me tired. I don't want it. Please take it back." That was a success, not because we employed control, but because we employed what we would call chinuch. I think the test of whether or not you're going to go for chinuch, real education, and control is, are you able to put your kids in the right situation such that they can have the wherewithal, perhaps the emotional maturity, to be able to choose good options and therefore exert chinuch and not quash them with control. I think with our CRP points, we have quite an opportunity to do that. We have an opportunity to have kids visit the shul, sometimes wouldn't necessarily be able to do so. Now, I'm community rabbi of Stanmore. We get a lot of kids, thank God, coming in to collect their CRP points with their families. And often they stay longer than that. They see what we have on offer and they go beyond. We've had a massive influx of young families in the community, thank God. And it's changing the face of the community, changing the face of the shul. And we're very proud of certain elements of what those points have done. Having said that, you don't need me to tell you that these times are tumultuous, relatively unpredictable, certainly in a certain sense unprecedented, and therefore there have been various upheavals or changes necessary to the CRP point system, and that is the topic of our evening tonight. We introduced the panelists before. We're going to be taking some questions. Towards the end, I'm going to tell you how you can send in more questions to be answered, all in their correct times. But this is the evening where hopefully we can inform, dare I say, somewhat inspire, and make us a little bit more attuned to real chinuch, education, not just control, and allowing our kids to experience what shul has to offer, getting the CRP points, seeing how that functions in the realm of getting into schools, and hopefully leaving a little bit more informed, more secure, more confident in the system that we have. So it gives me great pleasure to first introduce the Chief Rabbi, who is going to be saying a Dvar Torah in opening the evening.
The Hebrew words for education and dedication are derived from the same root. So what therefore has chinuch, meaning education, got to do with Chanukah, meaning dedication? It is clear that if we are going to have an outstanding and effective Jewish educational system, it needs to be powered and run by totally dedicated people. And that is exactly what we're blessed to have within British Jewry right now. A truly marvelous and extraordinary array of Jewish schools which are run by outstanding people and educators of the highest caliber. Now, it is also true that dedication must be accompanied by education, because if we're going to raise our children to grow up to become adults who will be fully dedicated and committed to their Judaism, that can only happen if they will be responsibly informed and educated about their Yiddishkeit. And that's why it's so critically important that as many pupils as possible will qualify for our certificate of religious practice. The coronavirus has presented numerous challenges to us in so many respects, and of course in this area as well. And I'm so pleased that we've been able to adapt to these new circumstances in order to guarantee that it will be as straightforward as possible for parents to be able to enable their children to qualify for the CRP. Thanks to our efforts, and most particularly thanks to the efforts of parents and their children, we will, please God, in the future have adults within our Jewish communities who will be fired with total dedication to their Judaism, thanks to the education that they will receive.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Rabbi. Dan, it's over to you. Dan is going to be explaining about the background to the recent changes, the 2021-22 CRP changes, and how we got there as well. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine. I'm absolutely delighted to join this panel to explain the considerable work that has gone into this year's temporary changes to the Certificate of Religious Practice system. The CRP system has now been in existence for just over a decade, following the ruling of the Supreme Court in the landmark 2009 JFS case. And it was created by the Office of the Chief Rabbi as a response to the outcome of that case for the benefit of the whole Jewish community. When we went into lockdown, the Chief Rabbi immediately recognized that the closure of shuls prevented the usual avenue where the vast majority of families get their CRP points from in the course of applying to our schools. At the Chief Rabbi's instigation, his office and the United Synagogue set up a working group to look at this over a number of months, considering various options with input from primary and secondary schools. It devised a solution that could be utilized by any OCR and US school that wished to implement it. It sought to keep the existing system intact to the greatest possible extent and only made changes where it was absolutely necessary. This was important to do for a number of reasons. It was important vis-a-vis the Department for Education and the Office of the Schools Adjudicator as the bodies with responsibility in this area, in terms of them being willing to accept our proposals, but also important given the fact that CRP is now a known quantity within the community. Families know where they stand with it. And finally, it was important in order to maintain fairness and clarity, the most critical features of any school's admissions policy. We wanted to make it as straightforward as possible for children to gain places in our schools in these very difficult circumstances. We felt that we needed to keep things as simple as possible at this time. They're clearly complicated enough, especially for our schools and the families applying to them. Lawyers were engaged throughout because we had to be very careful that what we prepared was legally robust. School admissions as an area is an absolute minefield of complexity, as I've since discovered. The DFE and the OSA, the Office of the Schools Adjudicator, must give schools permission to change their admissions policies. They can't just do it unilaterally. There are official timeframes for doing this, and if these are passed, admissions arrangements can't then be changed unless there is what is called a major change in circumstances. Well, COVID-19 certainly qualified as one of those. These two bodies are currently dealing with a huge number of schools that need to make changes to their admissions arrangements, and they are trying to do that in batches, starting with the 4,700 Church of England schools. We engaged constantly with the OSA and the DFE over this, over many months, and they've been incredibly helpful. We found out that there was an opportunity for us to submit our proposed changes as a group of OCR schools. This is what we then did. So we briefed the schools on the work we'd done to create a new CRP form and offered them a chance to adopt these changes by being part of the group that this was submitted on behalf of. It was a very detailed, painstaking process, and it took weeks to gather together all the documentation required to submit this application to simultaneously change all of these schools' admissions policies. All the while, we were very conscious of the need to provide families with the certainty as to what would be happening, acutely aware of the fact that the CRP process usually begins in May and that people have been asking lots of questions about how things would work. We believe this form to be a pragmatic and fair outcome, which is ultimately both clear and manageable for families during these extremely challenging times. It will be in place for 1 year, subject to a return to more normal circumstances. We will now tell you a bit more about the changes that have been made, how the form works, and what you need to do in order to gain the required number of points. Thank you.
Every rabbi has, thanks, Danny. Every rabbi has a rabbi. So when it comes to CRP points, I don't necessarily have a rabbi, but Dan is normally my first port of call, clarifying anything, anything that I get asked. Straight to Dan. Don't worry, I'm not going to give out your private email or details, but thanks very much for that. And amazing that you worked so hard on this with the rest of the team. Everything else that the pandemic has thrown at us, community and family wise, to really be able to change this is fantastic. Thanks so much for your time and working on that. Okay, introducing David Collins. He's going to be explaining a little bit about, a lot about what has changed and how it works, nuts and bolts, all the information we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine, and thank you to Stanmore Shul for hosting us this evening. I'm going to try and take you through as much detail as I can of what's changed regarding CRP for this year and what you need to do in order to gain the required number of CRP points. First of all, as Dan said, life is complicated enough at the moment, and we've tried to make this process as straightforward as possible, and also noting the changing circumstances that we constantly find ourselves in. Having been working on this process for a number of months, we've had to try to plan something which will be robust, even if there are major changes again to the way in which we have to live our lives. The first thing that we've done, and you can see this right at the top of the form, before we even get to section 1, is if the child applying for the school has a sibling already in the school who has previously established faith admission, already has a CRP, you do not need to apply for sibling 2, 3, 4, etc. to have CRP to gain a form. You simply submit the details on the form, and no further sections are required. And that, I think, will lift quite a number of people out of the need to fill in the CRP form in any kind of detail, and will make life as straightforward as possible for a large number of families. For those that doesn't apply to, I'm going to just take you through the major sections of the form. The first kind of major change is in section 1, where we have allowed online participation in shul services on Friday night. And what we're asking people to do is to attend 4 times in order to gain 2 points. And we're asking you to fill in on that form the dates, the host organization or community, and who the officiant or leader of that service was. And then on there, we're asking for a self-declaration. It's simply impossible for us and for our communities to be able to sign off on online participation. Not every platform allows for it, and we're relying on the trust of individuals to complete that section 1. A number of communities are still running Friday night services, even though there are some smaller numbers back in shul. And if anyone is having trouble locating a Friday night service, it's available every week through US TV, the platform that we're broadcasting from this evening. Section 2 and 3 are largely unchanged. We may have had to alter some of the dates because of the timing, but are largely unchanged. Section 2 is whether you or your child are currently engaged in any sort of Jewish education, any courses at the moment, and it's quite broad. So this could be attending a cheder, a Jewish primary school, an adult education course in your local community, in an organization such as LSJS, either physically or online. You complete this section, and it does require a signature from the head teacher, the course leader, the community rabbi who's overseeing that course, etc. And that will give you a further 2 points. Section 3, again, largely unchanged, refers to Jewish community volunteering, could be charitable or welfare work, and there's been a whole host of opportunities over the last number of months to get involved in such things, and this actually stretches back starting from the 1st of November 2018, so there's retrospective opportunities could be used here as well. Again, this section requires a signature from a supervising manager, volunteer leader, chief executive, somebody in that organization who could vouch for the fact that you have completed volunteering on 12 occasions. The last section is a completely new section, section 4, and this is a section which Ravi has given more information about. It's a brand new online course of 6 sections, each one lasting for 30 minutes. Which is going to be run and facilitated by Tribe. Section 4 was added in just to give every opportunity to people to get the points required. And I know there's already been many hundreds of people signing up for that course, and we will ensure that there's enough capacity to make sure that anybody who wants to do it can. All of the things, or many of the things I've mentioned, require the need for online access, for internet access. There is also provision for those people who don't have online access and can call and book over the telephone and also listen to the courses via telephone. Again, in section 4, the course leader, and this time it would be Rabbi Abramov and Tribe, who will have to sign off on the fact that you participated in those courses and will be taking a register. So 4 sections, each section you can earn 2 points in, and 4 points required in order to gain the CRP points. And section 5 is just a kind of final declaration by the parent or guardian. So plenty of opportunities to get the points. And if there are further questions, please do get in touch with us. We're going to be answering some questions later on during this presentation, but we're also happy to take questions offline later on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, David. Hope it's not too London of me to say we like the range of accents. So it's nice to see that breadth. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for working on it and making it super clear. I think that's going to be very helpful for many families. Okay, let's move on this evening. Over to you, Sue, who's going to outline a little bit about the school's perspective on the temporary changes, how families apply to the schools of their choice. Thanks for joining us, Sue.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine. First of all, I'd like to thank the Office of the Chief Rabbi for coordinating what has been one of many very challenging issues for our schools at this time. It was one of a myriad of things that we had to think about as schools went into lockdown, particularly as we were coming up to the admissions season, and we were already getting many queries on the subject. So it was great to be able to be part of a process. And what was really important, as have been mentioned by some of the other speakers, to achieve something that was very practical, that was pragmatic, and would enable people to be able to get the points that they needed to get without changing things too much. So what does it mean for families applying to our schools? Firstly, there's the process laid down by the local authority. Any application has to be done through your local authority, and each local authority has slightly different requirements. Then each school has its own forms used to gather information, one of which includes the CRP. So getting CRP points enable applicants to be prioritised, or is one of the prioritisations on the application list. In normal circumstances, there's a lot of paperwork that goes with that. This year there will be a lot more because there are potentially more options of things people can do. And many people in the past have just used the attendance of shul option, which is obviously not there. To let you know what the schools do, each form is individually reviewed and scrutinised to ensure that it is correct and complete, and queries will be raised if that's not the case. So it is really important that you who are completing the forms do get them properly completed and do get them properly signed off and approved by the people as it sets out on the forms. I could go into a lot more detail, but I think that David has already gone through the forms. Do read them carefully. They have been checked and we've tested them and they have been approved. So we believe it does work, and hopefully it will be of interest to you and your children as they go through the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. It is just amazing how many people have been asking about CRP points. I think it's a slight tribute to the Jewish community that during a pandemic we're still worried about education, and how schools and which schools and how we're going to apply to schools. I think that's a wonderful thing, and please God, we shouldn't worry about any more pandemics, but we should keep our focus on education, as everyone has implicitly underlined and how the Chief Rabbi has overtly outlined as well. All right, let's introduce our next section. David mentioned the course run by Rabbi Abramov, colloquially known as Rav E. So Rabbi Abramov is going to outline what this online course is, and what it involves, and how to sign up as well.
A very good evening to you all. The CRP online series are a wonderful opportunity for parents and children to come together and learn a wide variety of exciting and inspiring topics. We will begin our series with the Jewish calendar, looking at the Chagim, the Jewish festivals, and understanding that the Chagim are indeed a fascinating journey through Jewish history. We'll be looking at the sequence of festivals in the Jewish calendar and learning about these festivals. There will be a special focus on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot as we prepare for these special Chagim in our families, within our homes. We will then go to the 10 Commandments and learn how the 10 Commandments differ from the other 603 mitzvot in the Torah. There will be a particular focus on Shabbat. We ask ourselves, how can we make Shabbat more meaningful and inspiring within our homes for our families? We will then start an exciting journey, beginning from the very beginning of Bereshit, as we learn the 6 days of creation and recreation, taking us to the stories of our ancestors, their decisions, their actions, their challenges, and their attributes. We will ask ourselves, how can we apply these values nowadays in our homes, families, and communities? Finally, we will be crossing the Sinai Desert and reaching Eretz Israel as we ask ourselves, does this journey ever end? Has our wonderful nation finally reached its destination in the state of Israel? Please join us from Wednesday, the 26th of August, for 6 series on these interesting and inspiring topics. To register, please go to www.tribeuk.com. I very much look forward to us learning together and inspiring each other.
Okay, thank you, Rav E, and well done. It is evening. Well done for everyone having a decent amount of light in their camera. So, kol hakavod, well done, everyone. Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which is, I think, where we deal with the real questions, questions that people have sent in, or the general questions. Let's see if we can try and understand and create a rubric, as well as particularly addressing some of those questions. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to read some of the questions out, and then we'll give them to the panel that we have with us. I think that's probably the best way in terms of format. Okay, so first question is as follows. Have all Jewish schools adopted this CRP form? And if not, why would that not be? That question we're going to give to Dan.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine. So a large group of Office of the Chief Rabbi schools, both primary and secondary, and nurseries have done so, but not all of them. Each school will have considered their own particular context and requirements in relation to admissions in reaching a decision about this. So the best advice here is that it's important to check the admissions pages of each school website to see what they require for that particular school.
Okay, great, thank you. The truth is, so well answered. I'm going to give you another one if that's okay. Can I get points by going to shul in person rather than participating in online services?
So this year, very specifically, it must be online synagogue attendance only, and in-person attendance won't count this year. This basically ensures an equal opportunity for all applicants. As other speakers have alluded to, so when devising these temporary changes, this approach was one that we utilised to provide maximum certainty for families, given the obvious possibility that future government restrictions in relation to COVID-19 could mean that schools would need to close again, kind of at a moment's notice during the application window. So we went for kind of concrete certainty. And that's why it's only online shul attendance this year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Does my rabbi or my shul need to sign the form this year? Should my rabbi write a letter for me? I think, David, you touched on that a little bit earlier, but just remind us.
Sure, and I should add to Dan's point that you can also go to shul even when you don't get CRP points. But to answer the question about whether the shul needs to sign it, as I mentioned before, the first section regarding shul attendance, the online attendance, your shul does not need to sign. But in section 2 or 3, if you've been at an education course run by your community, run by your rabbi, then that section would be relevant for your rabbi or community to sign, community leader. And again, in section 3, if you've been volunteering and been doing volunteer work within your synagogue, within your community, again, it would be appropriate for synagogue leadership or the rabbi to sign that section. But it's not in the same way as it's been done in previous years, where the rabbi is signing off on synagogue attendance itself, which the vast majority of people kind of exclusively did to gain their CRP points.
Thanks for that. Just following up from that, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier as well, but the question here we've got on our sheets: how can you trust that people are telling the truth when they self-certify their online shul attendance? And I guess part 2 of that is to expect any evidence of participation in the online services. I know you touched on it before.
So to answer point 2 first, which is on the form, we're asking people to detail the date that they attended, the name of the organization that was the host of a particular synagogue, and also who the officiant was at that service. So we're asking for people to log some information on there, which, as Sue said, the schools will then review. We are relying at this time on people's goodwill, on people's trust to gain those 2 points. And remember that although you can get 2 points for that under self-certification, in the other 3 sections, it does need to be countersigned by somebody who's overseeing a particular process. So we're not relying on self-certification alone for all the points of CRP, but we are relying on it for that online attendance in section 1.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. That's really that's excellent and clear. Brilliant. Thanks, David. Right, Dan, question for you. I think some people have asked me this, so I'm glad that I can, as I said, the guru, so to speak. I'm gonna, fling it to you, which is the following: why is the only course that's mentioned an OCR-approved United Synagogue online course? Would a course by another community, organization, denomination count for this?
So this course has been very specifically designed for admission to schools whose foundation body is the United Synagogue and or their religious authority is the Chief Rabbi for September 21 only. Applicants who want to establish faith priority to these schools can choose to build up their CRP points in any way that they wish, from the ways that David has set out. But given the difficulties in attending shul due to the pandemic, this course has been specifically designed for those who might have difficulty like accumulating their points for CRP in other ways. Important to stress that the sessions are of course open to all applicants, and it's also possible, and again this kind of comes back to what David has said too, that it's possible for applicants to do other courses online or otherwise run by other providers under the education section, so section 2 of the form.
Great. All right. Thank you. Right. So I know we touched on this in the build up to this event. So this question's for you. Does the CRP form apply to in-year applications for 2020-21?
Yes, it does. It would be always normal to look at the current year's CRP to apply to any in-year applications. That might add to the complexity this year, and I would suggest that if people are unsure that they call the school concerned and maybe just talk through what they've done if, say, they're applying in February 2021 for that current year.
Right, great, very understandable. Okay, next question. Are there any specific lists of Jewish adult education and volunteering opportunities that are acceptable for those sections of the form? Over to you, David.
So just before I answer that question, I also just want to mention, and beyond our control, obviously the timing of the launch of the CRP during school holidays is challenging to schools and school officers. Just bear in mind the deadlines for applications. Secondary schools have until the kind of end of October, and primary schools until January. Don't panic. If there are questions you want to ask, there's time to do this in September and October, and just bear with the schools and those people are having a well-deserved break. In terms of volunteering opportunities, I know on the US website there's a couple of relevant pages. One is actually there's a frequently asked questions about CRP, and maybe we can provide that link to people. And there's also a volunteering section which gives volunteering opportunities mainly within the US and within communities, but also just gives examples of other volunteering opportunities. I think it would be kind of near on impossible to list every single educational and volunteering opportunity across our kind of vibrant community. And there's numerous organizations, large and small, where there is opportunity to get involved. And if people are unsure, do read the wording on the form carefully. But it's designed to be as broad as possible to make sure that you can take advantage of the amazing opportunities which exist.
Great, thank you. Yes, just to underline, please give our wonderful teachers and heads a nice summer break. I think they do deserve it. Next question. I think I understand this. I don't know, but let's go for this. Dan, would online Shabbat morning services count for that section of the form?
Well, we don't distinguish between different denominational services for the purposes of CRP. But only pre-Shabbat or pre-festival services are eligible for this section, as would be expected from a form created by the Office of the Chief Rabbi.
Nice. So here is a question. I'm just gonna, sometimes they say asking for a friend when it's really you. So I've got the script over here. It's nothing to do with me, but I'll happily pretend that it is. And it goes as follows. My child has a sibling in a different Jewish school where, in brackets, they obtained a valid CRP to the one they are applying to. Does this count as a sibling for entry into the school that we are applying to this year?
Thank you. The simple answer is no. It's something that we debated at length because obviously many people have filled in CRPs. Siblings don't necessarily all go to the same school, but we came to the conclusion it would be too complicated in an already complicated environment if people then had to check across schools, and not necessarily every school is using the same CRP, so the same level would not be appropriate. So, as I say, the simple answer is no. It has to be this a sibling at the same school to which you're applying.
Hey, thanks, Sue. And just to follow up on a slightly different question, but they're somewhat related, will the old CRP system definitely return next year? I can't believe we're using the word definitely about anything regarding next year, but let's just throw that into the question anyway.
Well, therein is the million-dollar question. We just don't know. We don't know what next year will look like. As Dan said earlier, we couldn't even use returning to live attendance, so to speak, in shul because we didn't know. We still don't know. That might be closed down in the very short term. So I think it's something that we need to keep under review. We've got some time. And, this time next year we'll tell you.
Right. Yeah. If the truth is, Dan, if the office of the Chief Rabbi do have a crystal ball regarding what's happening next year, can they lease it out to communities? We'd love one ourselves. Patent it first, right? Okay, thank you very much for the answering those questions. They're really helpful. Just to point out before concluding that the following email address is pertinent, relevant for anyone who will be wanting to send in further questions. In fact, it's so pertinent and relevant that they put it on the screen. And that is info@chiefrabbi.org, info@chiefrabbi.org for various questions relating to this evening and the CRP points in general. So I guess what's left for me to do here is to thank everyone on the panel and everyone else who's featured in the evening for joining us. Thank the viewers and the audience for joining us as well. I just want to end with a certain point which David mentioned earlier, and that is whilst CRP points are a great opportunity for people, kids, parents to experience shul, shul exists beyond CRP, even if, as we said, live attendance will not necessarily garner points, but live attendance in shul is live attendance in shul. It's a fantastic opportunity. If you go back to the point that we started with, in terms of parents having a choice to decide between chinuch or control. Are you going to manage your children? Are you going to dictate things for them? That's control. Or are you going to be mechanech? Are you going to educate them to put them in the right environment to make decisions for themselves and grow for themselves? Sometimes reward can be an element of control. Sometimes when you tell kids, do this and you're going to get £10, £20, whatever, that's a form of control because you're not actually allowing them to make the decision. They're just doing it for the money, for the sweets, for whatever promotional thing you're doing. And CRP points can have that danger as well. If kids' religious experience is, go to shul because we need the points, or come to Friday night dinner or else, and those are just forms of control. Long term, that isn't necessarily going to build a genuine love and devotion, dedication, to use the Chief Rabbi's words, to Yiddishkeit, to shul attendance. The best way to do it is, of course, come to shul, enjoy the online services, enjoy the online programming, discuss it afterwards. And by the way, this is also good for the CRP points as well. I think if we use that kind of approach, chinuch versus control, we'll have a much healthier generation going forward. We'll have a generation which is used to the enjoyment of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, and embraces all aspects and elements of our religion. And please God, our shuls will be teeming, our schools will be teeming, and we'll be able to provide the happy and positive infrastructure and framework that all our organizations and shuls, of the Chief Rabbi as well, try their hardest to provide for us. So again, thank you for joining us, and looking forward to various different programs and editions on the USTV.